Hello and welcome to Three Books with Dui. I am your host, Duilemi Awolalu. My guest for this episode is Nathaniel, a computer science post-grad from Middlesex University with a passion for philosophy. I got to know about him on Twitter, where he is a staunch defender of the Christian faith using theophilosophy. In this episode, we discussed his three books, which primarily center around proving the existence of God and the origin and development of language. Hey Nathaniel, what's up?
Yeah, I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm very well. How was your week and your weekend?
My week was okay. My weekend was alright too. Good football at least.
So yeah, I kind of found out that you support Barcelona. So I wanted to ask
sadly.
you this. Yeah, sadly. But I'm sure you would have said this like a couple of years back, like a year or 2 years back.
True.
What exactly is wrong with Barcelona at the moment?
Everything. Let me just start with that. Everything. You have our president. The guy is almost hell-bent on ruining the club. He doesn't. I don't understand his policy. I don't understand his transfer policies, his financial motivations. I have no idea. And then the coaches he brings. The coaches are usually inexperienced, and this insistence on the coach being someone that has played for Barcelona before is to me stupid. You look at Koeman. That's why they didn't even like Valverde, because he was someone who had not played before.
Was Setien a former player?
Yeah, he was. He was
Really?
played for. Yeah. So there's this emphasis on this guy must be from Catalan. He must be a former player, and whether the coach is good or not. And to me, that's just useless. And the transfer policy.
I think that's the way it has almost always been. Guardiola, Frank Rijkaard,
yeah. To some extent, it makes sense because someone who has grown in the club will understand how to go about things.
Yeah.
But then sometimes it doesn't make sense. I mean, we look at Setien. But then let's see what this Koeman guy does. I don't have high hopes.
I did pity you guys, because when I see you guys play like this, I'm always laughing.
To be honest,
you guys are just like literally hanging by a thread. Messi is just that thread. Keep making you guys relevant.
To be honest.
I can't complain. I can't laugh too much because I support United. It's almost as bad, if not worse, than you guys. But anyways, So what are your three books? Let's start off from there.
Okay, so my three books are 5 Proofs of the Existence of God by Edward Feser, God Without Parts, the Metaphysics, Divine Simplicity and the Metaphysics of God's Absoluteness by James Dolezal, and the Trivium, the Liberal Arts of Logic, Grammar, Rhetoric by Sister Miriam Joseph.
Yeah, those books are heavy, I won't lie. Every one of them are heavy. So which would you want to start with?
I'll start with the one I read first, 5 Proofs of the Existence of God. I think that's the first one I read.
Okay. Alright, so can you give us what it entails, what it means?
Okay, so the book discusses the 5 classical arguments for the existence of God. And the Aristotelian argument, the argument that Aristotle developed in his, I think, Physics, Book 12, and Metaphysics, Book 2, that's the argument that Aristotle developed there. The Neoplatonic proof. This Neoplatonic proof, some people have been arguing that the naming is not concise because you can see the proof almost everywhere. But then to me, naming is not important, so I guess I didn't really bother much. So, but then it's a proof that you could probably see it significantly in Plotinus in his Enneads. I think he's in his book 12 of his Enneads too, or rather book 9 of his Enneads rather. There's the Augustinian proof.
Yeah.
Okay, this one too. It's debated whether it's named correctly. This is actually sourced from Augustine, obviously, but obviously other people
Other
who
people,
wrote.
yeah.
Yeah. And then there's the Thomistic proof. This is one of my favorite proofs because I generally
That's
follow.
from Thomas Aquinas, right?
Yeah, I generally follow the philosophy of Thomas Aquinas, and this is from his article. Okay, this is actually separated around many places. I think you can see it summarized in the Summa Theologica.
Yeah, Summa
But then
Theologica.
it's
I also
scattered.
did this one, Contra Gentile. Was it the one that did that? I wrote that one.
Sorry, I didn't.
Contra Gentile something.
Yeah, okay, yeah, Contragent. Yeah. He's the one that wrote that too. And then the rationalist proof, I think you find this primarily in people like Leibniz. So those are basically the 5 proofs. I think I said them in order. I can't remember.
Yeah,
so those
yeah.
are basically the 5. Okay, so those are basically the 5
The
arguments.
5 proofs.
And then I think he devoted one chapter or so to discussing God himself.
Like I skipped that chapter. I didn't check it. I saw the 5 proofs. Then I saw where he had counter arguments against God,
Okay.
right? Like when he was countering those atheistic arguments against God.
Yeah.
But let's go by these proofs one after the other, because okay, let me let everybody know, not trigger one but warning. This conversation is going to be heavily philosophical, and there will be a lot of words you might not be able to understand that you need to use Google to check out and really need to think deeply about. All right. So, but I know that you, chairman, you are good enough. You are good enough to put us through this. Because to be honest, I tried reading. No, I think you are, because of the things I see on Twitter, the things you put out there. Like, yeah, I think you are equipped enough. But I tried reading a couple of these proofs, because I think he kind of broke it down into informal arguments and formal arguments, right?
Yeah.
I was still stuck at the informal argument. Do you get, like, if I'm stuck at this informal argument, how the fuck am I even going to be able to
get to
the formal arguments, right? So let's talk about the Aristotelian argument. I think that one is what first cause, unactualized, actualizer, more moved over kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So if you can just break it down a bit for us, like, let's tell us what it entails, what it means.
Okay, so this starts with the basic assumption, the basic statement. Change occurs. Change is real. Change is something that exists in the real world. This is where the entire argument starts. I don't think anyone can argue against this, that things around us change.
Yeah.
I don't think. Well, I mean, some people actually did. You have people like Parmenides who argued.
Yeah,
change
I saw
is
that
not
dumb
real.
argument.
Yeah. And I think his follower Zeno too, also argued against change. But to me, I don't think the argument works. I don't know if you want us to quickly brush through the argument to find out why it doesn't work.
Yeah, because even I think that because that argument needs syllogism for it to work, and the fact that there are syllogisms for that argument to stand require change, I think.
Yeah.
Like they need to bring out different premises, right? For that to work. And the fact that they are bringing out using different premises for that argument to stand in itself is a change. Something like that.
Yeah, that's a fair summary. If you're going to try to convince somebody that change is not real, the person is coming from an assumption that change is real. So
that you can change your mind in the first place.
So you can change your mind in the first place. So it doesn't work. So there's also another guy who went on to say the other opposite, Heraclitan. I hope I pronounced that Greek name correctly. Heraclitan. I hope I'm bad with Greek names.
You're not Greek. You're not Greek, so that's fine.
Yeah. So he went to the other extreme, and he said that everything changes. So there's nothing that exists, that is something that exists or persists in reality. That's the word. There's nothing persists in reality. So the me that's talking now is different from the me that started this. discussion, different from the me that started talking about football with you and Barca and all of that.
Yeah.
So the one that talked about Barca, let's call that Barca Nathaniel. Barca Nathaniel is dead now. And then the person, me, pre this discussion is also dead. And then the me post this discussion is alive and will kill me right now.
So there's you before, there's you now, and there's you in the future, like difference.
Yeah. So there's a difference. And obviously, this argument is also worse. It's prima facie bad. It's if nothing is real, then the argument cannot hold, because if your argument constantly changes, if everything constantly changes, and your premises of any argument depend on an argument standing. So if, let's say, I make a syllogism, Descartes exists, therefore Descartes is not dead. Depending on the fact that the me that said Descartes exists is still alive, and to lead to the conclusion, therefore Descartes is not dead. So if you argue that change is not, everything changes, the me that argued Descartes is alive is different from the me that argued Descartes is dead, and we have to start again, and again and again and again ad infinitum, and which is obviously absurd. So Aristotle sort of had this middle ground. I'm sorry, this is a long story, but it's actually very important that for this argument.
Yeah, that's fine.
So Aristotle came to the middle ground and said, okay, so change is a distinction between act and potency. So
acts and potency.
Yes, act and potency. So act is basically what is, and potency can be briefly thought of to what could be, but is not. So
okay.
My hand is right now. My hand is on the right. It's potentially on the left, but it's not yet actually on the left. And when I move my hand to the left, that's when I've actualized the potency of my hand being on the left. That's basically it. So my hand, a cup of coffee, I think that the example Edward Feser uses in this book. A cup of coffee getting cold is not actually cold at the moment, but it's merely potentially
potential to be cold.
Exactly, and then it gets cold.
It's not like something has a potential to be everything. It's just like the cup of coffee cannot just become a chicken.
Obviously, yes. So, although this is not something that he discusses per se in the book, but obviously your potencies is limited by your essence. That's who you are, is limit what you can do or what you can be. So this change is what is defined as this actualization of potency. So now, since change is a real feature of the world, and change is the actualization of potency, it logically follows the actualization of potency is a real feature of the world. So, and it goes on to say that, and it goes on to appeal to the principle of causality. And this is a principle that basically says there's nothing in the effect that is not in the cause. So if I heat up my stove, for instance, the cause, which is my matches or something, has heat, and the effect is the gas lighting up. So there's nothing in the effect that has the flames and everything. The flames are already somewhat present in the cause. I don't know if that's somewhat clear.
I got that.
So there's nothing in the effect that is not already present in the cause, and this is or not in some way present in the cause, and this is basically the principle of causality. So if everything is changed, and change the potency is the actualization of potency, then any change must be caused by something that is already actual. So any actualization of potency must be actualized by something already actual. So if my hand, so let's go back to the illustration of the cup. So if my cup of coffee is getting cooler, it's getting cooler because of the air around it, which is actually cold, and then it actualizes the potency of my cup of coffee getting cooler. Or my hand, which is actually on the right at the moment, with potentially on the left. When I actualize the potency of bring my hand to the left, my body, my brain, my firing of the nerves must be already actual to make that happen.
All right. But that being said, right? That everything that exists has a cause, right? And if you look at all these things carefully, right? Like you mentioned a cup of coffee, and what caused it to become cold is the air. Where did the air come from? You go back, right? He mentioned something about linear causal series, right?
Okay.
That is a kind of linear sequence, right? If you are going back in time. Then he also mentioned hierarchical causal series, right? So like I didn't really understand what it was, like what it meant by I kind of understood what that linear causal series was, right? But he now mentioned something about the hierarchical, that there are other factors also affecting that actualization of potential, right? There are other factors that are in place simultaneously at the same time, something like that. But if you can explain further what that means, because I kind of found it quite hard to really grasp.
Okay, so I will correct something that you said. The principle of causality does not say that everything has a cause. That is problematic.
True. Yeah.
So it merely says that there's nothing in the effect that isn't in some way present in the cause. So in the explanation of the hierarchical series, I think a way to illustrate this is just an illustration. A way to illustrate this is you could think of, okay, let's go back to the cup on the table.
Yeah.
On my table. So my cup rests on the table, and my table rests on the floor.
Yeah.
And the floor has to rest on the house, or the
foundation of the house.
The foundation of the house, yeah. And the foundation of the house has to rest on the earth. You cannot go on infinitely. You have to get to a bedrock where you can't go any further, because if there's anything going infinitely, it means that there's actually nothing that stands. I don't know if you understand what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Infinite
so regression. You cannot regress infinitely. You just how you have the cup, you have the table, and the table rests on the chair, and the foundation of the house rests on the earth. You cannot go back infinitely. You have to get to a hierarchy. It's a hierarchy. It's here and now, rather than or rather, to use Thomas Aquinas' word, it is per se. That is, it's essentially ordered rather than accidentally ordered. So accidentally ordered are the linear series where my parents gave birth to me, and my grandparents gave birth to my parents, and so on. So my parents dying does not necessarily mean I have to die.
Okay.
I don't know.
Yeah.
And my grandparents dying does not necessarily mean my parents have to die.
Yeah.
But if I remove the table from if I remove the cup from the top of the table, well, the cup will obviously fall down. If I remove the table for some reason, the cup will fall. If for some reason I just wipe out the foundation of the earth, the foundation that's resting on the earth, the table and the cup will have to fall.
Yeah.
And
they are dependent.
So they are dependent, and they are dependent here and now. And if you go back infinitely, it will mean that there is nothing. If you go back infinitely, to mean that a priori, that is logically speaking, the condition for the cup resting on the table, to stick to our illustration.
Okay, wait, hold on. Sorry, hold on. You mentioned a priori. For the people that will be listening that don't understand what a priori means.
Okay.
Give us just like a short definition of what a priori mode of thinking is.
Okay, so a priori is basically logically. I think I can summarize it that to something that is merely logically speaking. I don't have to look for any sort of experience. I can deduce it. I don't have to look for
any experiments.
I don't have to do any experiment. So kind of a priori thing is that bachelors are unmarried. It's a priori. It's obvious. Yeah. You don't have to go to conduct any experiments to know that bachelors are unmarried, because it's by definition bachelors must be unmarried.
Okay.
So that's a kind of a priori. So what I mean by that is that if the condition of because the hierarchical series actually depends on things existing. So the condition of me existing is dependent at this moment on another factor, and that other factor must be dependent on another factor, and that other factor must be dependent on another factor. So what the hierarchical ordered series says that this cannot go on infinitely, because if it goes on infinitely, it will mean that a priori, that is logically, there would always be an extra condition that must be fulfilled, which would mean that the condition for my existing would never be fulfilled.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's logically somewhat clear. So
yeah, makes sense. So like,
okay.
how do we now link? Because we have like four other approaches to go through.
Yeah. Okay. So
like, how do we link it? How do we link it to God in terms of actualization and potential?
Yeah. So as I was saying, these hierarchical ordered, or these essentially ordered courses or series must terminate on that which is so we're talking about the actualization of potency, and then whatever substance that changes, if there's a substance S that changes, and remember that we started with change the real feature of the world, so if there's anything that changes, a presupposition is that that thing exists. So if my laptop changes, for instance, there's a presupposition that my laptop exists. I think that is fairly uncontroversial. And if there's this presupposition, then the potency of my laptop existing from moment to moment, or existing at this moment, at any given moment, must be actualized itself. So the potency for my laptop's existence itself must be actualized. And then this cannot go on forever, as we argued, because it's per se it's a essentially ordered series rather than an accidental ordered series or a linear ordered series, a hierarchical series.
Yeah.
So this must terminate at what is purely actual, what is not in itself actualized. So what is not in itself actualized. And if something is purely actual, there cannot be more than one. Because if there is more than one, it will mean that there is something that is, there has to be some kind of thing that will be different from one purely actual to the other purely actual. Which will mean that one of them had unactualized potencies. Which will mean that what is purely actual has unactualized potency. It doesn't make any sense. So there cannot be more than one. And there's only more than one. It will mean that so basically this means that there cannot be more than one, so there's only one purely actualizer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That means there cannot be, and that single one unactualized actualizer has to be God, because that seems like the property of what God should look like.
Yeah. Ed Feser goes on to argue, I think they're about let me open the book now. Let me check and see how many premises he has. So I think he had about 50 premises for his argument.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
so
is that Aristotle?
No, this is Ed Feser's himself. This is the work itself. Okay.
So
he had about 50 premises. So it's I know that it might seem to some people as if we are jumping, but I'm trying to summarize it because
it's actually a lot. The book is like 700 and something pages or something.
Okay, yeah. So basically, what it says is that the purely actual actualizer. That's a mouthful. Purely actual actualizer must be incapable of change, and because this purely actual actualizer.
Did you say, is it purely actual actualizer or purely is it unactualized actualizer or actualized actualizer?
I think both of them work. Unactualized actualizer, yeah, that also works.
Okay.
But the phrase that Feser uses is purely actual actualizer. But yeah, your phrase actually works. I even like it. So you said unactualized actualizer. I think I like that.
Yeah.
So the unactualized. Yeah, the unactualized actualizer is not itself actualized. It's nothing makes it. It doesn't get its existence is not actualized. Remember that the hierarchical ordered series, the existence of each member of the hierarchical ordered series has a potency for existence, and this potency must be actualized by something else in every given moment. So this is not a past infant. I'm arguing for going back in time, arguing about in every given moment.
Yeah. There's something unique about this Aristotelian argument, right?
Okay.
It kind of made me realize. I think we had this conversation yesterday about
Yeah.
rationality and religion, basically. Like, it
Yeah.
made me realize that this was like hundreds of years before Christianity, right? I think like
Yeah.
about 500 years before Jesus Christ came, or even
Yeah.
more, right?
Yeah.
Made me realize that one could use rationality if one is very honest and you think very deeply to realize that there is a creator, right? Not
Yeah. And
necessarily really know him as far, like have relationship with him, right? But just know, because one way or the other, we are all like connected to him. I don't know,
yeah,
in a
I
way, so we
think
can always use our rationality to actually come to the realization that there is a creator.
yeah, I think you're absolutely correct. I think that's absolutely correct. In fact, Xenophon, who died, I think he died 375 years before, 375 BCE. That's
Yeah,
375 years before Christ and before the Common Era or something.
yeah,
He actually did this. He argued that there cannot be some sort of. He was one of the first people to kind of argue that there cannot be some kind of uh, um, demigod. That there must be a god that is different from all
yes,
the smaller gods that we see. And this is something I think we're veering up a bit, but then this is something that is very, very key in modern discussion, because many people fail to see this distinction between God and a God. And this is a distinction that does not even originate with Christianity. This is a distinction that we see as far back as Xenophon. This is a distinction we see in other religions, like
yeah,
we see it in Buddhism, in the distinction between, I've said in Buddhism, excuse me, in Hinduism rather, we see the distinction between Brahman and Bra, and a mere Deva. Brahman is the purely actualizer, and
yeah,
Deva is merely a god. We see it in the distinction between the Theos and the Theosis. This is the distinction the Greeks made. We see it in many distinctions, and this is something that many people fail to understand, that God is not a god. God is not a kind of God. So when they're arguing for or against God, they seem, in my view, they seem to focus on this God, this smaller G God,
this smaller personal,
yes,
yeah.
this smaller being. And
But even not even atheists. I think even Christians, some Christians fall
yeah,
prey to that, like
yeah,
seeing God as that being, because we watch stuff about Zeus, watch movies about Zeus and Poseidon and all these gods, and we just, I think it's because of the limitation of our minds, like kind of. But it's weird that thousands of years ago they didn't think that way. It was easy for them to really grasp that concept.
this distinction.
But now it's so hard that even the professors, people that have spent their years, their lives in universities and doing science and all that. That's why I said, if one can think deeply and honestly, because I feel like most of this is dishonest thinking. If I've been fair.
I
They
think
just want to push a particular agenda, right? And that push, okay, that makes me want to even talk about this little discussion we had on Twitter. This is like a quick segue anyway. About the cause of whatever decay we are seeing now in society, in Western culture, to be precise, right? And you kind of blamed it on Kant's universalism. So in a way, I kind of thought of the same thing. Jonas, when you said it was Kant, and my mind went to universalism and the fact that the golden rule and all that stuff, yeah. But I wasn't sure that maybe we're on the same page, because I also think that that's one of the problems. The fact that we feel like morality is purely human constructed, something like that. If we think rationally enough, we can come up with our own ethics, and ethics that are enough for us to be able to navigate ourselves through this world.
Yeah.
That's what I think.
Now the I don't know if I call this the sad thing about Kant is that he did not just limit it to ethics. You're being kind to him by limiting it to ethics. He did
Yeah.
not just limit this to ethics. What is critical philosophy? This is what it's called. Anyone can always read the critical philosophy of Kant on the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. But what it's a brief summary is that Kant felt that there's a distinction between what the world is and how we perceive the world to be. Kant felt that we could not know what the world is. We don't have any knowledge. We cannot, in principle, know what the world is.
Yeah.
But then we can everything else. We create constructs because we are human beings and we can reason.
Yeah.
And starting with Descartes' cognitus sum, I think therefore I am. Starting with this base assumption that we are merely, we are just mere volitions of reason.
Yeah.
Or Kant felt that we, by will, create reality. So everything that exists is almost dependent on our minds. So the laws of nature that we exist depends on our minds. They're all the construction of our minds.
Yeah.
The moral principles, as you mentioned, there's also a construction of our minds and so forth. So this was the distinction that Kant. This was something that Kant said by Kant.
And I kind of think that unfortunately, I don't know if this is where they got it, the Foucauldian postmodernism, right? Probably that's where they got it from. The fact that everything around is a construct, hence everything is relative.
Yeah. So so when Kant actually got this from Occam, got this idea from Descartes, and Descartes got it from Occam, and so the logical consequence. So obviously, everyone pushed Kant's logical consequence to the extreme, and one person that really did that was Friedrich Nietzsche. And Nietzsche pushed it and said, since we cannot know what the real world is, well then there is no real world. Everything is just a function of our mind. If everything is just a function of mind, we determine what the real world is, and that is what gave rise to his seemingly popular statement. I think he said, "Truth are just errors which we have forgotten that are errors." If everything is reduced to, if every fact that we have, everything we know about morality, everything we know about ethics, everything we know about reality, the better the sciences, is ultimately reduced to what our will to reason, or our will is ultimately reduced to a human being's mind, then reality can be altered as such. And this is where Foucault, sort of degrading this even more, took on the idea that since reality is merely constructed, we create reality. And then you get to see people thinking that they can build reality into existence, or they can build something into existence. And I think one prominent way, not the only way, but one prominent way, is in the modern gender discussion. That if someone wills to become a man, whether the person is born a woman, and person is born, we can become a woman.
Gender fluidity. I can just feel like I'm a woman.
Yeah,
I am a woman.
Yeah, and this is why they see the phrase such as, this person is assigned something at birth, because they don't, this Kantian notion that reality as such, laws of nature itself, is something that it ultimately rests on our concepts, on our conception of reality, or nature.
But isn't that self-contradictory? Because Foucault says stuff like truth, there's no such thing as absolute truth. Truth is relative and stuff like that. But isn't that self-contradictory? I had this conversation with Timmy, because Timmy was pissed. He was pissed off at this relativism, right? The fact that the very notion that you feel that truth is not absolute, it's itself an absolute truth, right? You believe that truth is not absolute. That in itself is meant to be an absolute truth, and it disobeys the law of non-contradiction. All right. So what I told Timmy, because Timmy was really pissed that day, and I told him that the thing is, those people don't even they are not bounded by the laws of logic. They will tell you the laws of
Yeah,
logic are all abstract.
yeah, exactly. So all of these
They are all abstractions, and everything we feel like is logic, and whatever way we feel we build rationalities is false or can be false, depending on how you think about it. So it's a big pity. It's a big pity. I think that's the worst philosophical school of thought that we have right now, and it's really affecting us till this day, because that's what's being taught in schools. You hear people say stuff like truth is relative and all that nonsense. And I don't know, I just feel like this is the beginning of the end of the Western civilization because of this. And I think Nietzsche or someone said it, I can't remember, that the Christianity is eating itself up, right? Because of Christianity's insistence on trying to get truth, all right?
Yeah.
Trying to look for truth at all cost, right? People will keep pushing the limits to the point where they, in their quest to find truth, will now start, what's the word? We now start questioning the very truth that makes them even search for truth in the first place. So that is why you see them questioning. Christianity is always the battering ram.
Yeah, I think I think what you're saying is close to what Nietzsche actually said, and Nietzsche said that although he was talking principally about morality per se, I can't remember which work he said it. I think it was in Essay Homo. I've actually not read it in a long time, so I can't remember. But he basically said that. So he basically said that the search for truth is what drives, or search for moral truth, or the existence, not necessarily the search, but the existence itself of objective moral truth is what sort of founds Christianity. And if Christianity and if there's no such thing as truth, then Christianity is gone.
Yeah.
And this was basically what he said, so in some way.
But do you think that there is a way out of this nonsense?
I'm not one to give prescriptions, but
well, what do you think? What do you think is the way out, really?
I think it's simply returning to this pre-modern way of thinking.
You think?
I think that's the smartest solution. I think that thinking about things in and of themselves, thinking about things as Socrates did or as Plato did, is the best cure to these things, and rejecting the notion that everything can be founded on our minds and everything, and that reality as such does not exist and can be altered at our whims. I think that's the best antidote, in my opinion. Others may argue that the best antidote is going back to the moderns. Okay, so there's this distinction between the pre-moderns and the moderns, and the moderns basically felt that everything can be they reduced. Okay, so the moderns basically reduced everything to mere mathematics and science, and that's this reduction of the things to mathematics and science.
I think that was the Enlightenment.
Yeah, that was basically the Enlightenment. Well, I'll argue that this Enlightenment would ultimately almost fall back, or come back to postmodernism, and it would almost ultimately get, in every iteration that we do of modernity, every iteration would probably
you always fall into postmodernism.
Yeah.
This is sad, really. So before we, I don't think we can take the other the other four proofs, but before we get to the next book, right? Okay. There's something I've been thinking about, about civilization, the Western civilization as it is, right? Do you think whatever ethics we have right now all over the world, whatever ethics we are governed by, whatever structure we have, is really embedded in Christianity? Was it caused by Christianity? But because I just feel like all of this happened at a particular time, or like if we actually trace all these things back in time, they happened at a particular time in a particular place. Why did it happen at that particular time? Like the scientific revolution, for example, or the invention of printing press and all that stuff. Why did it happen at a particular time in a particular place? Like, do you have any sense as to why that happened? Or do you think Christianity had a part to play in the kind of morality and ethics we have everywhere, especially Western civilization right now?
Okay. If I understand correctly, I think you're asking two different questions. One question you're asking is ethics founded on Christianity.
Yes.
And the other question is science itself and the this scientific rationalism and
rationalism, scientific. Yes.
Is it founded on Christianity?
Yes.
Okay.
Like, so without Christianity, if Christianity hadn't happened, would we have had a world like this? Would we have had the scientific revolution maybe somewhere else, maybe in the Aztec Empire, something, or the Chinese Empire, something like that? Would we have had it somewhere else, or would we have had it in Europe without Christianity?
That's a tough question, to be honest. I'm tempted to say, as surprising as this may seem to some, no, I'm tempted to say that I don't think it is true that Christianity necessarily caused these things. But then there are also arguments against it, and I think I'm on the weaker side, because this guy, what's his name? The guy that wrote Dominion. Well, there's a new book, Dominion. Tom Holland, yes. So Tom Holland wrote a new book. Well, is it new? I think 2017 or so. Dominion, and he argued this thing. He's an atheist, so for the viewers listening, yes, so this is not some pastor that is arguing for Christianity. He's an atheist. And he argued that basically Western civilization, the basic concept, the core concepts of Western civilization stem from Christianity.
Yeah.
And I think to some extent that is correct. Well, we have to be less vague. If you're talking about concepts such as the separation of the church and states and things like that, I think those concepts are ultimately founded on Christianity. In fact, you can see it explicitly written in the works of Augustine.
Yeah.
You see this concept like separation of work of church and state. You see this concept of homosexuality, the homosexual man. All of these are concepts that are founded on Christianity. But on the issue of morality in general, I think I follow Aristotle. Am I more loyal to Aristotle than I am to Christianity? I don't know. That's the question for our debate. Yeah. But then I think I follow Aristotle and see that we can actually reason our way from the natural law. We can actually think about the essence of things and derive what we call the natural law. However, this natural law itself must be founded on the eternal law, which must rest on revelation. So my answer is a bit complex. Yeah, I don't think it's exactly a yes or no issue. I think it's a bit more complex than that. I think while yes, important concepts such as that, a huge concept of a huge thinking of democracy right now, but I think they all stem from original Christian thoughts. I think understanding of
the idea that the human is sovereign and has like divine spark.
Yeah, I mean, as Nietzsche would say, that in Christianity all men were made equal before God, but now that God is dead, and before the mob which replaced God, all men are not equal. So this concept like all men are equal, these concepts of these chivalrous acts and these altruistic practices, all of them ultimately stem from Christianity.
Yeah.
But then I think that we can, into some degree, reason about ethics through without necessarily free Christianity. I don't know if my answer is any coherent. I don't know if that would.
Yeah, that's fine. It's kind of different from what I suspect, because me, I'm tilted towards the Christian side as to where all of this morality stems from. The very fact that every human being is sovereign, because I don't think we would have found it I don't think it was in any other civilization, any other culture.
Yeah.
There was no rationale, to be honest. Let's be honest. There is no rationale. I don't think there is. Maybe I'm wrong. Any rational argument for that everyone is equal.
No,
how about
there isn't. Like I said, as Nietzsche said, that's all men before Christianity thought that all men before God is equal. But when God is dead,
exactly,
none of them are equal.
All men are not equal. Yeah. So I feel like we have to depart from rationality to come to that idea that all human, and that is the very fundamental of every ethics we have right now. Whatever rule we have right now, everything stems from that idea that the person next to you is as equal as you are. So fair enough. Yeah. So let's move to the next book. Which one do you want to go with?
Okay, let's go with Dolezal's book. I keep on mispronouncing his name. Dolezal. The God Without Part, the Metaphysics of Divine Simplicity and God's absoluteness.
I actually don't know what that means. To be honest, I don't, because I see you talk about it a lot, about divine simplicity, and I've heard this guy talk about it, David Bentley Hart.
Yeah.
I've been listening to a couple of his stuff recently, and the guy is mind blowing. I can't even lie. So for you guys listening, go check out this theologian called David Bentley Hart. The guy is really, really good. So what's divine simplicity? I beg.
Well, to add to your David Bentley Hart thing, I would recommend reading his experience of God. I think. Yeah,
I think I'm halfway through. Me and Timmy, we talked about it on the podcast already. Consciousness, bliss, and love.
Being consciousness.
Being consciousness and bliss.
Yeah. So divine simplicity. Yeah. So this basically says that. Okay, so the basic assertion of divine simplicity is this: nothing outside of God causes God, and God is different from everything else. So nothing outside of God causes God, and God is different from everything else. And this is the basic assertion of the doctrine of divine simplicity. And now it's barely a radicalization or pushing this doctrine to its full logical limits.
Yeah.
So you can think about it like this: God does not have any physical parts. God does not have any logical parts. God does not have any metaphysical parts. So I think I have to get through the logical, metaphysical, and physical part. So the illogical part could be that, let's say, in a linear sequence, a logical part will be in your life. There's a logical part of you existing, which is you and the past you and the future you. Or okay, let me not use linear. Let me say the logical part of you sitting down. I would assume you're sitting down in this discussion. Like I am. I don't think I could stand for that long. And then there's the logical part of you standing, the logical part of you eating. These are logical parts. You can think about it this way: these are logical parts of you, and that these must be denied of God. God does not have any physical parts. Of course, God does not have any physical body at all, and God does not have any metaphysical parts. Now, this is where it gets a bit tricky. So, a kind of metaphysical part, as Dolezal argued, is basically the act and positive distinction. That's what Dolezal uses. So this act and positive distinction is something that's very, very key. So that's what Dolezal uses, and that God does not have any potencies. God does not have any God cannot do any. He's purely actual. He doesn't have any potency.
Okay,
Doesn't have any.
so if I get you correctly, that
Okay.
means God cannot love, but His love is the act. It's that very act of love itself. Is that what it means? Like,
Okay.
because you feel like God is just like saying God doesn't exhibit pathos. It doesn't.
Yeah. Yes. That's the
It
phrase.
doesn't
Yes.
feel. Is that itself? Is the
Yes. It's
is the
impossible.
act. Okay.
Yes. It's impossible.
Impassible. That's the word.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, so God cannot merely just love.
Yes.
He's more
It's
than
love.
that. He's love itself.
Yes.
Okay. That's
I think.
hard to,
Yeah.
that's hard to
It,
grasp.
yeah, it is, to be honest. I mean, there's one funny joke of one woman who she wanted to start reading Thomas Aquinas, and as she started, she found most of his works difficult. And then she saw one book on divine simplicity, and she was like, "Oh well, this book was simple because it's named Divine Simplicity." And when she started reading it, she was in for a surprise. So,
I saw the number of pages. I saw over 1,000 pages. I was like, nah, man, nah, G, I'll pass. Nah, G.
It's actually kind of, I think, one fundamental metaphysical difference. Aquinas identified about 8 or so. He identified genus species distinction. He identified act potency distinction. He identified supposite nature distinction. He identified.
Okay, sorry for cutting you
Yeah.
there. I don't want us to skip this. You said God is impassible, right?
Yeah.
Why does God have to have that quality? Why does he have to be impassible? Why does he need to be the actual pathos itself?
Okay. So you remember that when I started the discussion, I said that God. Okay. So to start with, being impassible does not mean that God is unloving. I want this distinction to be very clear, because I think what drives a lot of people away from this doctrine, because when they hear God is impossible, as David Bentley Hart says, that when there's a negation, people always think, when Westerners, people influenced by them, hear of a negation, they always think of it as a bad thing. So if there is a without, if I say God is without, it's impossible. It almost means that God is somewhat some sort of cold-hearted, cold stone. Nothing can affect him, kind of Batman figure.
That was what came to my head when you mentioned that.
Yeah, so I want this. I want the few words I say to push this thing out of your mind. This is not what it is saying.
Okay.
So what it means by God is impossible is that nothing outside of God can affect God's being, God's eternal bliss. So remember, like I said, the basic doctrine, the basic assertion, the basic what's the word now? The basic what we basically assert with doctrine of divine simplicity is that nothing outside of God causes God in any way, and that God is different. Those are the two basic these are the two basic admissions that we make of divine simplicity. Nothing outside of God causes God, and God is absolutely different from us.
So that's why we say God is unchangeable.
Yes, that's why we say God is unchangeable.
But in scripture, right? I'm trying to play devil's advocate.
Yeah, sure. I was hoping you do so.
the irony of me saying devil's advocate when we're talking about God. But anyways, in scripture, right? If I want to take the fundamentalist stance,
yeah, that's fair enough.
God, it is written that God was angry, or God was upset, or God loved, or God. Ezekiel was supposed to die, right? And God, and he went on his knees, and he told God that he did that, he did this, he did that, and he brought his petition to God, and
God forgave him.
God forgave him, and God allowed him to live for I think another 15 years. So basically, God changed his mind, right?
Yeah.
So what does it mean? Or like God, after he wiped the whole earth with the flood, and he said he regretted that.
Okay.
So there is this difference. This is totally different. that nature of God in scripture is different from what you are talking about right now. So how do I make sense of that?
Okay, so like I said, we have to make the distinction that God does not, God is, that we have to not forget that it's not as if God is cold stone. I want to I want to constantly harp on this because this is very important. And then I think this is a pretty common and absolutely warranted criticism that if we say that God is impassible and doesn't change and everything is one act, what about the scriptures talking about him doing all of that? But I'll say that the scriptures also say that God speaks, but I don't think that would warrant us arguing about the size of God's voice box, let's say. I don't think that warrants that. So when the thing that as another book I was reading, that even this picture of this absolute being, this absolute being who is omnipotent, omniscient, omnibenevolent, and so on, even this picture of God is not still an entirely accurate picture of God. So when we're talking about God aphthatically, that is, we're talking about God in a negation. Rather than anything positive. So we generally don't have anything positive, not positive in like a good way, that we don't have anything good to say about God, but that we can't.
That's cataphatic.
Yeah, that's cataphatic. Yes.
Yeah.
So is that we generally start with negations of God. So when scripture talks about this, we are ultimately limited in language because we can't express this statement in ways that people would understand. The primary purpose of scripture is how does God's relationship affect me? So I know the next question that is going to come up in many people's mind is that, okay, since this divine simplicity seems tough, or since scripture does not seem to agree with divine simplicity, why do we assert it? As Dolezal argued in this book, the Bible gives us a very clear picture of God, a picture of God that is omniscient, a picture of God. You talk about God's omniscience in many places in the New Testament. You talk about God's power in Romans 4:11, let's say. You talk about God's love in, I think, James or John in First John, in one of John's letters. You talk about God. So you talk about God that is all powerful, all knowing, all wise, all benevolent, and this. And by the time you have to, and obviously you talk about Deuteronomy 6:1, that God is alone. Here O Israel, your God is one. That's what I think Deuteronomy 6 says. So we have this picture of God that is it's radically different from everything else, and the only way you can hold all these qualities together without having problems, without getting to paradoxes, without getting problems, any kind of paradox, is if you assert divine simplicity. And the inverse is the case. If we assert divine simplicity and we try to think it through, we find out that the statements of God, such as God being a say, that is God being only God, that's only God existing, the statements of God being infinite in nature, the perfect statement of God being perfect, statement of God being immutable, all of these logically flow from the deduction of divine simplicity. So when the scriptures talk about God making decisions, the scripture is just many using it like analogically rather than literally, because we do not, our finite language cannot in principle talk about God. So it's in principle we cannot talk about God in principle with our finite language. So all we are stuck with, let's say, this allegorical and or rather analogical notion of God. So when you say that God loves, or that God forgave Hezekiah, this is many analogical way of saying that there is something, that God did something like what we would call forgiveness in human nature. This is basically what Aquinas says, that there is something in God that is somewhat that is forgiving. That's something that is in God that is similar to what we recognize as forgiving in human nature. So this is basically the reason for talking about God.
My sense is that what if we are saying all of this to accommodate our idea of an infinite God, right? Because what you said was, if we have that notion that God feels and God experiences pathos as such, right?
Okay.
It doesn't fall in line with our idea of an omniscient, omnipresent God, the infinite God, right? So we have to be rationally consistent, right?
Yes.
That is, I feel that is us trying to be consistent with our thinking. And there was something Timmy talked about like a couple of days ago on Twitter, talking about infinity and God. I never saw it through that lens before. That my mind was, when I used to think of infinity, I look at time, temporality.
Okay.
All right. Infinite, like infinite numbers going on and on and on and on. And he said that an infinite number is not really infinite, because it is just that. It is just a number. But they are just numbers, right? So infinite in the sense, what he meant by infinite God, like infinite in not just temporally,
qualitatively infinite,
and qualitatively, right? And in essence, he can be everything. He's everything and anything that is, and that we can conceive of and cannot conceive of, right? But we are trying to box God into like this, in a bid not to box God. We are trying to box him in the sense that if God is infinite, if he's all powerful, why can't he feel? Like, do you get what I mean? Like, what if he just chooses, because he can do whatever he likes, to feel and to do all of these things he did in scripture? What if he actually did them because he can? But because we are trying to be consistent with our arguments for him, or of him that is infinite, he cannot do this. So we are trying to, in a bid not to box God, we are boxing him. Do you kind of get what I mean?
I somewhat understand what you're saying. Yeah, so I think I would deny a couple of things you said, or I think I would grapple with them. Forward, we're not trying to box God. This is it's a negative theology. And I'm thinking of the best way to phrase this. When divine omnipotence rather does not mean that God can do anything. That is not what divine omnipotence means. It means that God can do anything that is logically possible. Although, I mean, we can see that anything that is not logically possible is not metaphysically possible, or is not physically possible. So it is not a thing. But then, what is important is that what omnipotence means, that God can do anything that is logically possible, and acting contrary to his nature, that is, his nature as the ultimate, as the infinite, is not a negation on God's part. It is God's. I mean, it's God's inability to fail. I mean, God's inability to fail is not a negation, not a thing on omnipotence. I mean, we cannot say that God is so omnipotent that he cannot fail, so this is somewhat a problem for God. It doesn't make sense. So God acting contrary to his nature is not a problem for his omnipotence. It's not a problem for that at all. So it's important that we recognize that this is what omnipotence is. And of course, for God to be omnipotent, it means that he has to be divinely simple, because for anything that is omnipotent must mean that he can actualize all potencies. To use our potency distinction, he can actualize all potencies. And if he can actualize all potencies, it means that nothing must actualize God himself. Which means that God must be purely actual. And if God is purely actual, it means that he cannot change. And if he cannot change, it means that he's impossible. So everything somewhat logically holds. If we are going to remove the fact that what if God omnipotency allowed him to do that, it will no longer be omnipotent, but rather he will rather be merely potent, to put it that way. You don't look at all potency. In fact, if you look at the word omnipotent, the ability to actualize all potency, everything that is possible. So God is not. So, but if God being able to act contrary to nature, it's no longer being omnipotent, but rather he has just become a finite creature like any of us.
Okay, but there is something I kind of discovered going through this journey of this theological journey of redefining God as such, and like trying to erase that notion of boxing God as just that Father Christmas up there in the sky, right? But there's a danger to it, right? For me personally, I feel like the more I go into this, the more I kind of see God as less personal. Do you get? He becomes, the more I try to know him through that angle, the more he's far away from me. Do you understand? Do you get what I mean? Like, before I had this idea, like this childish like idea of God my Father, all right? I ask him for stuff. I can call him, and sometimes you can even cry to him and all that stuff. But when we are going through this journey of seeing God in this larger light, seeing God as you said, God is impossible, and all these things, he kind of plays with our mind to see him like he's not, in a bit to know him rationally, it tends to be farther away from you on a personal level in terms of revelation and all that. So I feel like maybe there should be a balance, I think. I don't know. I'm talking about personal experience. Like, personally, I feel that way. Because I feel like the more I try to know him rationally and I'm not paying so much attention to the revelation side of God, I tend to see him farther away from me. It's no longer as personal as he used to.
I think I would well, I don't know. I don't feel that way, to be honest. So maybe it's not as if I'm invalidating whatever you're going through or anything. I'm not saying that you're going through rubbish or anything. That's not what I'm saying. But I think from my experience, it has made God real. Now the problem with calling God a person is not, as David Bernhardt has said, it's not the concept is a conception of personhood. Now we have reduced personhood to this mere, like I said, because of, like I think we touched on earlier, because of this Kantian notion of personhood to the mere will. We have reduced the personhood to the mere, as we had to call the mere ego. And this reduction of the mere ego is a poverty. It's not an ultimate fulfillment of God. So when you bring on this poverty to God, it's something that is somewhat repulsive. God cannot be poor in any sense of the word. So this when you reduce God to this ego, it becomes problematic. It becomes sad.
I think God becomes this. Talk about it.
Yeah. So and the second problem with this God is a person is the word a. Now if I say that you're a person, it means that you're a kind of something. So if I say you're a person, it means that you're a kind of person. So that means there can be another kind. There can be another kind of person like me. There can be another kind of person like my mom or my dad or someone else. But when we say that God cannot be a person, because there cannot be another kind of God. God is radically alone. God is our say. So and I said these are the admissions of divine simplicity. God is alone in a sense, and God does not. And nothing outside of God causes God.
Divine simplicity. Simple indeed. Simple indeed. But with this, at first when I saw it, I was like, I'm most likely not going to read this. I think I am actually going to read it. Even if I'm not going to finish it, I'm actually going to read it.
I think Bentley Hart introduces it in his Experience of God. So if you finish the Experience of God, it sort of
are you done with it?
I've read it a couple of times, but then I've forgotten some things, so I plan on reading it soon. I think I've read it like twice or so.
Are you serious? All right. So I kind of like watched a couple of his interviews with different people, and I really like his eloquence and the way he articulates. It's hard to really put all these things in paper, put all these things in words. I mean, like try to articulate these things very, very accurately. It's insane. Like it takes a lot of brain power, a lot of brain power and use of English.
Yeah. Which is why I don't write about it. I mean, if you read Timmy tries. He
tries, and still I find him very difficult. Like his articles, I have to like go over and over again to read and check dictionary. I can just. There was one thing I've heard of this word before. Creatio ex nihilo.
Okay.
I've heard of it several times before, but the way he used it on one of his articles, I had to like read on it, and I spent almost the whole day trying to read on just creatio ex nihilo before I could even read the entire article. So it's hard to like really articulate all these things. Really, really complex. But anyways, let's move to the last book.
I think this is the perfect transition to the last book, because this book is the Trivium, the liberal arts of logic, grammar, reasoning, and the entire purpose of this book is how to properly articulate your thoughts. This is basically what the book. so I think we perfectly. It's almost as if we scripted it. Well, we did not script it. It was a perfect transition. So yeah, I think, and I really like this logic book because it focuses on language. Many of the others I've read, if you read Gensler, if you read all the other more pop, even the more pop culture logic books, I think you go to a site, yourfallacyis.com or something like that. Those are funny sites that talk about logic, but I think they don't focus on language. They don't focus on the nature. They don't focus on the function of language, and that this is very, very key in trying to understand how people think.
Language in what sense? Like, do you mean the development of language?
Okay, so yeah,
evolution of language.
Yeah, so the book talks about what they call general grammar, and this general grammar is something that is common to all languages that have existed, that exist now, that will ever exist. And this general grammar consists of the separate using of the syncategorematic words, which refer to relations between words, and categorematic word refers to substances and their accidents or their attributes. So I think I'm getting too technical here.
Yeah,
I think I'm getting to.
I think you are.
So what the book basically focuses on is that to put it tersely, there are some features of language that has to be there before a language is called a language. So this is the nature of a language and how to use this. So the basic rules that guard this language is a rule that would probably guard other languages too. And this general grammar, these rules on how to use categorematic words, for instance, and syncategorematic words, these the rules on how to use this thing will be general in all languages.
But those words you used, you mentioned psychochromatic language. I can't pronounce.
I said categorematic.
Like how what are they exactly?
Okay, so categorematic words are words that are self-sufficient, you can think of categorical words as um, pronouns and nouns, for instance. Those are words that refer to substances. You can think of, you can also think of adjectives, verbs, and adverbs.
Yeah,
So those
yeah,
are
yeah.
those are words that refer to um, um, the attributes of words. So those are categorical words. So the words that are they can stand on their own.
Mm-hmm.
They are self-sufficient, so to speak. And then there are syncagrammatic, which are logical connectives. These are prepositions. So you can think of syncagrammatic words like and,
Yeah.
for instance. That's that's the conjunction. It's just used to join words together. It doesn't stand
Like every
on its own.
language on earth
Has to have, yes, this
really.
feature of this syncagrammatic words and categorical words. And I think the book is generally very, very important because in nowadays people don't seem to reason much. I don't mean this pejoratively at all, but then people don't seem to.
They now want to really change language.
Yeah. No, not necessarily change language, but it's reason. I mean, as the book says, it's logic, then grammar, then rhetoric. People don't know how to
Come
properly.
again. Logic.
Then grammar, then rhetoric.
Hmm.
So this is how it generally flows. So you can have the logic of things, and it is grammar that expresses those logic, and it is through rhetoric that you can put your grammar stylishly. I mean, there's a poem by, I think, John Milton in his Art of Logic that he talks about this distinction. I was trying to look for it to quickly grab it, but I don't know. I can't find my Milton book anywhere. I can't find where I kept that Milton book.
Guy, you read John Milton, oh, Jesus Christ. Oh my goodness. But yeah, continue.
So he basically drew this distinction between how he said that, I can't remember how the poem goes, but like logic can stand on its own without grammar or rhetoric, but grammar needs logic. But then rhetoric, grammar can stand on its own without rhetoric, but rhetoric needs grammar, logic. So that was basically the gist of the poem.
So from logic to grammar to rhetoric and to maybe developing separate languages.
Well, I think development of separate languages will start around grammar. So it will start after grammar. So once you've developed the grammar of a language, you can then know how to.
Because I'm kind of trying to link this with postmodernism.
Okay.
Their logic, the grammar, the rhetoric. Like you could see the way they talk. You could, without even knowing who they are, you see what they say, right? And you know what this person, who this person is, or you could know the kind of philosophy that guides them. I don't know if it's almost the same thing. We are talking about the same thing, really. Because the way you mentioned this hierarchical order, this logic, grammar, and rhetoric, you see from their logic, that truth is relative. You see it in their grammar, tell you, always talking about stuff like patriarchy, oppression, victimization. Like you see all these words flying around. They just use these words loosely. Racism, sexist, misogynistic, and all of this stuff. I see it in their rhetoric everywhere. Come with very stupid ass stories. I'm not saying that those stories are completely untrue, right? But now we've uploaded them into things that, this is our reality. This is everything Western civilization, everything we have ever made stands for. Do you understand? And you see it, now you see them trying to change language in itself, like trying to change, as you said, grammar, language starts emerging from the grammar side of the hierarchy, right? You see it, like this pronouns, these new pronouns they are fighting for. That was even what made Jordan Peterson famous. This pronoun of a thing. They want to change language and force everyone to use that language. I don't know. It feels like this follows the same pattern.
Yeah, I think you're somewhat correct, although I'll put a little modifications.
Okay.
So the book also discusses how we um form, how we get to know things and we get
Okay.
to form languages. Um, so the book says that okay. So from our perception of reality, we create phantasms, and these
Okay.
phantasms are like images of reality,
Yeah.
basically image of things. So the image of your barrel, the image of things,
Yeah.
and from this phantasm, we sort of draw out um the core concepts that are not in themselves related to, or they are not in themselves dependent on these phantasms. So let's say you're talking about to know something completely. We form the concepts through our experience with reality. But then remember, like I said, can't deny that we can know reality.
Yeah.
So when you deny this reality, then everything, then you can form any concept you want.
Yeah.
And because you can form any concept you want, you can make any language you want, or you can say any word you want, or you can reduce it to just words. And this is something Wittgenstein actually did. He tried to show
I
that
was
this.
about to mention this gets in when you mentioned
Yeah.
language. I was about to mention
So
him.
yeah. So this reduction of language to when you deny the existence of reality as such, you sort of reduce everything to mere language, and this is the problem with a lot of things. So you see things. I mean, there's one thing that I constantly find it funny. Like you say that someone is assigned the gender at birth. I find that some concept so funny because I don't understand how the subjective psychology of the doctor determines the objective gender of a baby. I don't understand how that's possible. But yet we see this in this postmodernist discourse, and it's because of you're right.
Yeah,
It's because of
don't
this.
say this in outside. If you say it, if you say it outside, they'll call you a bigot. They'll call you a bigot.
So I think to some degree, you're right.
But that means, does this book mention Noam Chomsky? Does he validate his thoughts? Because you know Noam Chomsky, yeah?
Yeah, I know Chomsky.
Yeah, so does he like talk about his works? Because there are some things I don't really agree with Noam Chomsky on, right?
Well, I think this book.
But does he talk
Okay.
about him? Because I know he's a language guy. He's a professor
Yeah.
of language or something.
Yeah, it doesn't talk about Chomsky. Chomsky is. Chomsky is this book is much older than Chomsky, to be honest.
Really?
This book was written like 19. Okay, it's not older than Chomsky. I just googled his age now. Chomsky was born in 1920. It's okay, so it's not
Chomsky is
older.
a really old guy.
Yeah, so this book was written in 1930 something or so.
Oh, he's quite old.
Yeah, 30 or 40 something. Yeah, so but this was around the time Wittgenstein was also popular.
Talking about language, yeah.
Yeah, so it's somewhat relevant, although she doesn't exactly mention Wittgenstein. So
Because I kind of tried to read about Wittgenstein and like the articles I was reading about him seemed like it was going to be too complex. Talking about logic and language and all that stuff. It's like nah, G. I'll pass.
Yeah,
well, fair enough. I also see the development of language. Yeah, I think I was discussing with someone about this like a year ago.
Okay.
Development of language in kids and children is almost synonymous with the development of language in a civilizing culture, almost the same way, right? Like as you said that you have to experience things in terms of fantasy first.
Yeah, fantasy.
Before we now build that up through experiencing that into language. I don't know. I feel that with the developmental psychological aspect of kids in terms of language is almost like if you study it's almost the same way. as language emerging in cultures.
Yeah,
I think
so
this guy John Piaget wrote something about that.
John Piaget, I've not heard of that name before.
Yeah, he's a developmental psychologist.
Okay. I really don't read I really don't read that much on development psychology. But then I think he's absolutely right. I mean, like the book said, we form a percept on encountering reality. Then from this percept we form a phantasm. From the phantasm we form a concept. From the concept we assign a word, or we assign a sort of marking, an arbitrary marking to mark this concept, or an arbitrary statement to mark this concept. Like for instance, the concept cat does not exist in the word cat. So the cat, for instance, I mean, and to illustrate this, I can say cat in 4 different languages. It doesn't mean I've said 4 different things. So the concept is a recognition of the essence of things, recognition of their substances, of their essence, and then forming concepts, and from these concepts we use language to recognize them. But as you correctly mentioned, when the postmodernists deny our ability to know reality at all, then we cannot. Then everything becomes reduced to language, and everything reduced to language, everything becomes arbitrary and can be changed at whim. And I think this is a very dangerous ideology.
Fair enough. There was something I wanted to ask you. I just skipped my mind now. Yes. So about language, right? I read somewhere that the Chinese, in terms of science, in terms of mathematics and all that, they are miles ahead of any other race. The Chinese, the Japanese, and I kind of saw it somewhere because of the language and the way they write. That makes it easy for them to grasp numbers in ways that other cultures or other races cannot. So I don't know if you have an idea as to why it is, because I remember I just saw it vaguely. I didn't really read about it, but I just saw it, and it kind of made sense, like the way language develop. In a way, language can help in mathematics, because if you see the way they write is different from, it's not like alphabetical.
Yeah, they use
you get what I mean?
What
Like,
they call
it's different.
symbols.
It's different from when you see a Chinese. I mean, when you see a Spanish writing, or you see an Egyptian a Cyrillic writing or something. There's something unique about the Chinese writing that makes it feel like it is closer to mathematics and other languages. So I don't know why is that, and how that works, how language can develop certain skills in some cultures than others.
To be honest, I'm not sure either. I'm not
I think
exactly.
it's something cool, something someone can look into. I'll try to look into it. It just came to my mind when you mentioned language. But anyways, I think we've had a very, very fruitful, wonderful conversation, and I know that this is just the tip of the iceberg. We've not really touched enough. Like the first one, we only talked to one of the pros.
Not so much sufficiently, to be honest.
Yeah, so because that's the thing about theology and philosophy. Sometimes when I look back and listen to my conversation with Timmy, I'm like, we barely just touched the surface. We barely. But anyways, regardless, I'm thankful for taking out your time to have this talk with me. I really appreciate. Maybe we'll do this thing some other time, talk more on one or two of these books. All right, and please do have a great week. And for everyone that listened, thank you and goodbye.
You too. Bye.